Well, good evening, good evening, everyone. My name is David Allen Batali, and welcome to the Libby Book Club for WA. Tonight, my guest is Fleur McDonald, the voice of the Outback, one of the most prolific and beloved authors of rural literature in Australian history. She puts out 2 books a year to a very, very large community of dedicated readers and people who just love to discover the world that she's created on the page and in the hearts of readers across the nation. We're going to get stuck into her latest book, Into the Night, in a little bit. But first, I'd just like to start by acknowledging that we are meeting, I'm broadcasting tonight from the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Now, Fleur, good evening and welcome to the Libby Book Club for WA. How are you?
I'm well, Dave. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And I was going to say, you are a writer that needs no introduction, but I think I should give you an introduction. It is my choice.
So, let's not be too presumptuous here.
That's good. But I quite like your blurb here. So I tried to write something better, but this just nails it. So Fleur McDonald has lived and worked on farms for much of her life. After growing up in the small town of Ururu in South Australia, did I get that right?
Ururu.
She went Jularuing, eventually co-owning an 8,000-acre property in regional Western Australia. Fleur likes to write about strong women overcoming adversity, drawing inspiration from her own experiences in rural Australia. She has 2 children and an energetic Kelpie. Now, Fleur, you do write about strong women, but tonight we're talking about quite a strong man.
Yeah.
A little bit about Into the Night and the further adventures of one of your most beloved characters.
Yeah, Detective Dave Burrows. He's just sort of shot to fame, hasn't he? And he's completely changed my life, even though I wouldn't have ever thought an imaginary friend would change your life, but he really has. And yes, so Into the Night is the 6th in the Young Dave Burrows series. And he's found himself in WA. He's in the stock squad at the moment, and one of the things he really wanted to do was be able to work his way up to being the lead detective in the stock squad. So at the moment, he's just sort of kicking around the edges and learning off his mentor Bob Holden, and solving crimes when he can.
And just before we continue, I just want to remind everybody tuned in tonight, jump in the chat if you have a question for Fleur about anything writing related, anything, even about other books you may not have read Into the Night. Maybe you're thinking about it, maybe you're halfway through, maybe you want to know how it ends. I won't tell you how it ends, but if you have a question for Fleur, please jump into the chat and let us know, and I'll insert it into our chat, and we'll also leave some time at the end. So can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write Into the Night? Why this particular fork in the road for Dave? He's recently divorced. A lot of things have happened to him in the lead up to this particular chapter in his life. But what made you take this fork in the road to bring him to WA?
Well, he's probably, the stock squad is based in WA, so he is in Perth. Normally he's sort of out in the regions. He can be based in, he had a posting in Barrabine, which was sort of very loosely based on Kalgoorlie, but then he went back to Perth, and then he was just sort of getting shot out to where he needed to go. But he and his wife Melinda have been having quite a few problems, and that's something I really like to highlight in these books, because what Dave goes through, many other coppers go through, and we're very lucky to have an amazing police force, so it's just highlighting some of their issues as well. Is nice to be able to do that in a book, and just in a way where it's not bashing you over the head with information. It's someone really going through a problem. So Dave is pretty angry. He's down on his luck a little bit. He's really short of a bit of coin, and it seems to him that every time he is really down on his luck, that his ex-father-in-law turns up, and he wants him to go and see the kids, or when I say he wants him to see the kids, he puts all these horrible parameters in place which cost Dave money to be able to do to jump through hoops to get to see these kids, and he has to get his own lawyer involved. So it's really costly, and Dave doesn't mind spending the money because he wants to see his kids, but it's pretty tricky for him.
I guess when it rains, it pours. While he's dealing with all this, quite onerous conditions in his personal life. He has 1 hour to see his kids at one stage, which doesn't happen to an hour. It gets cut.
it's pretty awful what Mark has done to Dave and the way that he's done it. And I guess that's one of the reasons that, you know, Dave just completely does throw himself into work, because he finds it so difficult when he sees his kids that he wonders if it's actually worth it. You know, he really gets to that point where it's so difficult for him to say goodbye and he doesn't know when he's going to see them again, that he just wonders, is it really, really worth it?
And driving everything forward, you know, there's a disappearance at the heart of this story. It's a mysterious disappearance. It seems in the beginning to the investigation, hang on, this should be quite easy to solve, but it's not. Like a lot of real life disappearances in the bush, there is far more to this than meets the eye. Can you tell us about the disappearance that's at the core of Into the Night?
Yeah, so Leo Perry is the man who gets the gig of disappearing, and he's got a very faithful dog called Coffee, a Kelpie called Coffee. I really mucked around with Coffee's name because I thought, oh, how can I do something that's really different? And I thought, oh, well, there's really good and there's really bad coffee in the country, and then there's really good and really bad kelpies. So, you know, we'll have some coffee here. I don't know so much about in the city, but certainly in rural areas of WA, you can just look at a power pole wrong and the power goes out. You know, we have lots of trouble during summer where there's pole top fires, and it's a real bane of our lives, our power supply. So Leo doesn't like to leave the farm when the power goes out. You know, he's got stock, and the pumps don't pump when the power goes out, so he's got a petrol generator. And what actually happens is he's just about to go to tennis with his wife and 2 little kids. Power goes out. Wife gets a little bit snarly with that because she knows he's not going to come to tennis, and this will be however many weeks in a row that he hasn't been. And Leo goes down to start the pump, and one of his jerry cans is leaking and he doesn't realise it. So as he starts the pump and the spark from the spark plug, it blows up. Lovely, great big fire that goes all the way through many, many farms, and all the volunteers turn out. But once the fire's out, they realise that nobody has seen Leo or Coffee, and they don't know where he has gone. So the SES gets out there, they search, they can't find him, and that's when Dave and Bob are called in.
There's, underneath the action, there's some dark elements here. You know, that there's perhaps the threat that this might have been a suicide. There's also questions over succession within the family. There's lots of pressure and lots of underlying forces here that are, this is very much real life for people, isn't it? These sorts of things can and do happen.
Yeah, succession is a really tricky one on farms. Can be done really well, can be done really badly. I know plenty of families that it's been done both. I know families that have lost loved ones because the succession plan has gone very badly. So I think it's something that really does always need to be talked about, needs always to be in the forefront of farmers' minds. But, you can never, everyone has their tipping point. Even the strongest person in the world is going to have a tipping point, and nobody actually knows when that's going to be. And that person probably doesn't know when it's going to be until they get to it either. And, opportunistic things like fires could make people disappear.
Fleur, could I ask you to read an extract from Into the Night? I think it's a good chance because it puts us into the one we've chosen. It puts us into we're with the police, but at the same time, we're also about to get into the fire ground and the investigation. And there's some foreshadowing here, isn't there?
Yeah, so there's always a bit of argy-bargy between the local cops and the blow-ins, and they're not really, the locals aren't really 100% happy to see Bob and Dave that have turned up. So that's where this sort of starts. But if you guys are supposed to solve all the rural crimes, Robbie asked in between blowing his coffee, what are we meant to do? We're stationed here in the country for that exact reason. Although the question was asked with sincerity, Dave got the feeling that there was an undertone to his words. He reassessed Constable Robbie Mulligan. Young, maybe 25 or 6, well-built, obviously worked out, blonde hair. The absence of a wedding ring on his left hand didn't mean anything, but Dave didn't think he'd tied the knot yet. He was sitting, casual and relaxed, foot resting on the opposite knee, leaning back, watching the two ring-ins carefully. Dave refocused on Bob. How was he going to answer? Son, you've got a lot of work to do out here. Us fellas, we're around to help out when we can, bringing more home skills towards farms and the like. Dave here, he rides motorbikes, drives trucks when we're doing a muster, checking stock numbers. And me, well, I'm pretty apt at trawling through invoices and paperwork, talking to the blokes in the stockyards and the like. Understanding fertiliser rates and the DSEs. He leaned forward and gave Robbie's foot a consolatory pat. You do know what DSEs are, don't you? Robbie's eyes narrowed, unsure if this was a test or a casual question. No, he answered. Dry sheep equivalent. Got to do with the amount of sheep you can run in a certain area. Look, don't worry about us. We're not here to take over. We're just here to help. Robbie's face did not give the impression he was convinced about that last sentence. In fact, he hadn't rolled out the welcome mat since they'd arrived, but Dave decided to give the young constable the benefit of the doubt. Bob's heavy-handedness first up, and perhaps the comments that could be classed as condescending might have had something to do with Robbie's attitude. Bob spread his hands out and gave a smile. Now, I hear that you were first on the scene. What can you tell me about it? Lots of smouldering logs and burnt grass. I didn't see or smell any dead stock, but I didn't get much further than the house, which there was really nothing left of. Weatherboard and the tin went up so easily. He referred back to his notebook. I've got photos if you want them. Conditions of the day were average. There was an FDI of... Robbie stopped himself. FDI means Fire Danger Index, in case you're unsure. He threw Bob a look as if to say, I know the farming language too.
Quite like that little, just, I don't know, a bit of a measuring contest, a bit of a tete-a-tete between them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't want to give the game away too much, but what was like, the reason why did you put Robbie in at that start there? Because you've got that really great relationship between Bob Holden and Red, who's his old pal from Major Crimes Unit, but you've got this young buck who's in there who's kind of suspicious of them and having that tension. Is that something that you've observed in country towns with like you said, the blow-ins coming in and trying to take over? They say they're not taking over, but they kind of are.
Well, I think one thing about all of that, the two old fellas actually know each other, and so they can sort of, they're always going to get along. But the young ones are still learning. Like Dave's in between all of this, so he knew enough to keep his mouth shut and not antagonise the situation, whereas Robbie is still learning, and he knows he's going to have Red in his corner because that's the way that country cops work, and that's the way any cop has to work. But he's going to be knowing that Red's got to back him up. And so when there is a bigger crime where another squad has to come into a country area, the country cops want to be the ones to solve it because it's their patch. They're not going to get the glory if these other ring-ins decide that they're going to have a crack at solving it. So until they all sort of work out their pecking order, a little bit like girls in a boarding house, they've just got to work out their pecking order a bit.
It's quite a nice scene. Just from there, where do you get your inside knowledge on police and detective work? I saw on socials you shared a photo of yourself meeting with a police officer, having a coffee and picking it. Is that one way you do it?
That's the only time Dave and I've ever been known to have a coffee. Normally it's wine and beer. So yeah, look, I know. So Dave is a mate of mine. It's actually quite funny because he thinks that the character Dave is based on him, but I had actually created Dave before I met Dave. So the detective, like the character, was in my first novel, Red Dust, and I had written about the stock squad, and my publishers asked me to check some of these facts. So I rang the stock squad. It was just before they were shut down, and my friend Dave answered the phone, and he was head of the stock squad at that stage. So, he's had so much experience. He's been all over the state. He's he's had crimes that have happened that he hasn't been able to solve, but he's had heaps that he has. Rural crime used to be opportunistic. It's not so much that these days. It's pretty it's pretty planned. But there's still that opportunistic side. But it's really hard to solve. If you've got a farm that's, say it's 50,000 acres and you've got sheep in, 3 times a year, maybe once for shearing, once for crutching and once for landmarking, you're not necessarily going to know if 100 sheep's missing out of one paddock and 100 sheep's missing out of the next one until you've got them back in again and done another count. So rural crime is very difficult to solve. Having Dave in my back corner as such, he reads everything I write before I send it off to the publishers, and sometimes all I get back is reads well. Other times I might get a bit of a longer spiel saying check your facts on this page, but he never, very rarely, unless I ask an outright question, does he give me answers to things. Like I go and research it myself. I asked him the other day what a body looked like after it had been out in the elements for 3 days. And he told me to go and buy a lump of meat, put it in the back, bury it in the backyard. And it's okay here, like I've got heaps and heaps of room, like there is, I've got 5 acres here. So it was okay to go and do, and dig it up later, which is exactly what I did. And I now know what this looks like 3 days later. And that was such a great piece of research to do. And it's ended up in the previous book to Into the Night. So Rising Dust, just so it's authentic and it's real. The other thing I did was I went to Toowoomba in, I reckon it was 2018 or 19, somewhere there. It was before COVID, and I spent 3 days with one of the detective inspectors from the Rural Crime Squad over there, and that was an awesome amount of fun. I got to see their computer programs. Obviously, we were very careful because there's a huge privacy issue with all of this. But I got to see their computer programs, how they use Google Earth for investigations. I heard so many amazing stories about the way that these guys and girls had solved crimes. Because to be a stock squad detective, or it's called rural crime now, but I keep referring it to stock squad because I keep forgetting. You've got to be a really different detective. Like, you've got to be able to ride motorbikes, you've got to be able to ride horses for mustering, you've got to be able to count sheep, to count cattle, to understand the intricacies of the way farms work and our whole selling, the way we sell stock and the way we sell wool. Crims are just incredibly clever. I heard a story in New South Wales. Someone stole, I think it was about 300 or 400 sheep ewes, really fine wool ewes, so like good quality wool, worth a lot of money. Sure, the sheep gave the sheep back, but kept the wool. Under the cover of darkness, brought the sheep back onto the farm. It was hilarious, but what a clever way to just make a little bit of extra money.
It was like a mobile shearing station or something. How would they have done that?
Well, they took the sheep actually off the farm.
Yeah.
They disappeared for 2 or 3 weeks. Shore them somewhere else, and then brought them back again. The fact that they brought them back is incredible because that's like returning to the scene of a crime, and also the likelihood of them getting caught. There were 2 likelihoods there of getting caught. So the fact that they brought them back was incredibly intriguing. Yeah.
Your story in that, Fleur.
I think I've used it already.
Well, it's funny you say. I was at a book club about 2 months ago, and there was a lady there who said her father was he was a rural copper, and this is back in the 60s. And one day somebody died, and so they said, "Oh, you need to drive the body to Perth to put it in the morgue." And he said, "Okay, well, I'll put it in the station wagon." And so he drove with his she was like 6 years old at the time, just drove to Perth with the cadaver in the back of the old Holden.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to do what you have to do. Like, I think that came through really strongly and Into the Night. It's, look, we've got this very strange situation. We don't have a lot of resources to chuck at this. There's just 4 coppers having let's figure out what we can figure out.
Yeah, the thing of having to do what you've got to do is all through all of my books, not just into the night. You know, Dave pushes the boundaries again of into the night. You know, he gets on the road to go to a different area to investigate something there, which would not have been approved by his superiors, but he had to go and do that in all good consciousness to be able to find out what he needed to find out. Yeah, he spent a lot of time up north in the previous books. There's been deaths up there where they have to put bodies into a cool room and then wait for the for airpole to be able to get there to pick the bodies up. So yeah, we certainly do what we've got to do in rural areas. And Dave's probably one of the best at it.
Indeed. Fleur, I've got a question for you from the audience. Bit of a tricky one, but it's a little bit of explaining, sorry. So it's from Melanie. She says, I don't understand how Dave can be such a good cop, but he didn't notice Jill's disappearance up to Mika for at least 16 to 20 hours. Why didn't the in-laws notice too? Isn't it strange to abandon your kids of only a few days after their dad disappears?
I don't actually think so, because these guys were not necessarily around all that time. They didn't have to see Jill, and they didn't necessarily have to see the in-laws either. You know, once the original questions have been asked out of the family, they go off and do their own thing. So even if, and I can't remember exactly what happened in that area, you'll have to forgive me there, because I've written another book in between, and I'm just, I can't remember whether they had to go back and interview anyone in that time. But, you know, that's what coppers do. Once they've initially interviewed the family, you know, the family are grieving, or, you know, they're confused or frightened, or you know, whatever their emotions are at the time. And they usually try and leave them be unless there is a real need to go back and see them again.
No, good answer, Fleur. Thank you. And if anybody else has another question, please send it our way. We'll be happy to answer. Now, the cover, Into the Night. To you, what does Dave look like? Is that sort of an approximation of him, or, you know, readers, everyone has their own image of what Dave would look like, but to you, what does he look like?
So there is a very, very good reason that you'll never see a head on these covers. And that the fact is, everybody has their own little fantasy about Dave, and we don't want to upset that. So you're just going to get something around here. Whether it's back or front, we've had both so far. If you look in inside the cover, you'll see all of the Dave they actually don't have a head at all around them. To me, is that really interesting? I think Dave, for me, is in his 50s. Even when I'm writing these early Dave books, he's not in his 50s, obviously, but in my mind, he's 50, on the wrong side of 50. He's got that grey hair, he's got really blue eyes. He doesn't look like anybody that I know, but he's certainly fairly solid and a beefy man, and that's come through from all of the from when he's been young to all the way through. All he's done, he hasn't changed in any way in my mind. He's just got grey, as I'd like to think all of us have, except we all put on a bit of weight, but you know.
It was Easter. I blame Easter. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know. And was it fun to write Detective Bob Holden? You know, like they say the devil gets the best lines, but I thought Bob had better ones. You know, his whole outlook on life, and that he's got a new missus who's, you know, put him a bit on the straight and narrow. He's stopped going to the pub so much. He's concerned about his appearance a bit. You know, she's ironing his shirts, and everyone's giving him stick about it. It's a really nice little sprinkling there.
I absolutely love Bob. And, you know, when you said to me before about reading something, I should have found that bit where they've been out to a different scene, and they're coming back in, and Dave hits a kangaroo, because Bob is in the process of giving Dave this great big long list of things to do. And Dave's sort of going, yeah. And he's driving, and this roo comes out, they hit the roo, and Bob doesn't break stride. He just turns around and said, mate, if you don't like what I'm saying, you don't have to take such dramatic actions, you know. And he just really, he's just such good fun. And I don't know where those one-liners come from sometimes. They just sort of pop into my head. I don't spend hours thinking about them. They just sort of pop up. But he delivers them so dryly as well. He's got that real Northern Australian dryness, that dry humour that they just, he could have cut your legs off and you wouldn't have even realised. So I just love Bob. He's great. So it'll be interesting to see how long he stays around for, because he's been with Dave for 3 or 4 books now, and coppers usually move their partners on over time. So I'm not sure how long he'll hang around for.
Do you know your local coppers in Esperance?
When they came to Rotary, I did. No, it's actually funny. I started a while ago, I did know, but they change over a lot. And sometimes when you turn up and you say, I write books, you actually do get the cold shoulder, because they don't want you sort of misconstruing things or writing about things that they don't want you to write about. I was really lucky with Dave. Dave and one of his mates that worked in the stock squad always said that they wanted to get as much information out to as many people as they could, so they could get people reporting these crimes. And Dave wrote me an introductory letter to both the New South Wales Rural Crime Squad and the Queensland Crime Squad. New South Wales Crime Squad wouldn't have me there, because they were nervous because I was a book writer. They weren't sure that they wanted me around. Whereas Mick Dowie, who was the guy that I spent the time with at Toowoomba, he was exactly the same as Dave. We just need to get this out there so we can get people reporting crimes. So you can get met either way.
That's good. What an opportunity. That's great. I was a journo in Kalgoorlie for years, and I used to go hang out with the gold squad. The gold theft detection unit. They were great. They were full of these funny stories.
Absolutely. It was Chris Park. Anyway, he might have been. I don't know if he was up there when you were there, but I do know.
Yeah.
I do know a couple of those. So if I'm looking for specific information, I've got no trouble in getting on the phone and calling people. And like I say, sometimes you get met with no way, and other times you go, yep, let's talk to us. One of the guys from the Gold Squad, actually, I went out to Orabanda to do some just research out there for Fool's Gold, and he said, go and see this fella out there, but you better not tell him that I sent you, because he won't want to talk to you at all. So I think that had a couple of run-ins together, I think.
Fair enough. And just, casting your mind back to writing the book, do you know how it's going to end, or do you sort of start with your premise and just see how it runs, see what Dave investigates and finds?
Yeah, that's exactly how I write. I have no idea what's going to happen. I'll have a bit of an idea about what the crime is, but as for the subplots that I've put in there or the ending, I never know. I figure that if I know what the ending is, the reader might work that out, and I don't want that. I want them turning to the last page, because I hate it when I pick up a book and 2 chapters in I work out exactly what's happened, and when that happens, I go to the end, I read the last chapter and go either, yeah, I was right, I'm not reading that book, or I'll go, oh, they caught me. How did they catch me? I want to know how they caught me, because normally I can work these endings out. So I'm really careful about not knowing or certainly not thinking about the ending. The book that I'm just editing at the moment, that's coming out in November, I wrote the epilogue to that, and then halfway through I went, oh no, I can just change this whole ending. I deleted 3,000 or 4,000 words and rewrote the ending just as I was about to hit send to the publisher. But the ending still worked. It was just completely different to as I had got there. That's what I thought it was going to be. And the second idea was better. So I just run with that.
Now you've got 2 layers of bluff. No one's going to pick it.
Yeah. That's what I like to do. And whether or not I'm successful at it, I'm not sure. It's really interesting. The people that do get in contact with me, they often say, we have got no idea. Some people say, oh yeah, we worked it out. And that to me is always a little bit disappointing, just because I never want that to happen. But you know, if 90% of people are saying they didn't work it out, well then I'm happy with that.
For sure. And so, you know, you're called the voice of the outback, and what I love about your writing is you lean into the details that only somebody who lives on a farm, lives in the outback, and knows this can put in. Is that a, like, you know, is that a thing of pride for you to be able to weave that in and not dull it down, not find ways to, you know, let city slickers know what this is. This is our language and this is how this is going.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
You can still understand, you always contextualize it, but it's, you know, you're not there's no pulling of the punches.
Oh, well, look, I'm never going to romanticize what happens in the country, because that to me does nobody any favors, especially if they decide that they want to come and live out here, and they'll suddenly read my book and go, well, that's not right, that's not authentic. There's always, everything I write is really, I try to make really authentic, because I think that also helps turn pages as well. But, you know, as far as I'm concerned, our landscape is a character in itself, and we live in the most amazing country. So why would we not showcase it? Yeah, farming has its own language, rural areas have its own language, just the same way as what city people do. It's something that, I don't know, when I used to live in the Flinders Ranges, I just used to think that it was the most beautiful part of the world, and how could you not tell stories about it? How could you not encourage people to go and actually see it if they wanted to, or could you make them go and see it just by reading a book? The other really good thing about the Flinders Ranges is it's a very, very good place to drop bodies if you don't want them found, because it's so rugged and isolated, I suppose. So, and that's another reason to set the books over there. But I just believe that the landscape as a character is a living, breathing person as such as you know the humans are. It's beautiful, and I love it, and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
And you consult pretty widely with farmers and with you know, mining your own experience, and also with police and anyone who's in your book. You've done your research. With landscape, do you walk the landscape? Do you, or have you write about places that you visited or been inspired by and connected to?
Well, you can drive through a town and have a look at the main street and write about the main street, but unless you get out of the car and you feel the atmosphere and you actually walk along that main street, you've got no idea. You can't write about it authentically at all. A couple of years ago, like when we were right in the height of COVID and we couldn't leave the state. Normally, I would go home to the Flinders Ranges and catch up with mum and dad. But this particular year, I bought a camper trailer and I went up north by myself and camped at Mount Augustus and all through the Kennedy Ranges and, you know, all these beautiful places. I got 2 books out of that, you know. I walked along the edge of Cattle Pool, which is right next to, only just down the way a little bit from Mount Augustus Caravan Park. And it had been an amazing year for wildflowers and water, and the waterfalls were everywhere. But underneath the water, there was the roots of the trees and and it was sort of, I don't know, just shimmering underneath, and they looked like they were moving. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, they look like a dead body waving up at me. And I just went, this is exactly where I am going to set this particular book, this particular time. And I don't know if anyone has read Rising Dust, but I think, oh, hang on, I'll just check that it is Rising Dust. I'm sure it is. Yeah, Rising Dust. Rising Dust. There was about the 2nd or 3rd chapter in that, Dave and Bob are camped out in the middle of nowhere. They're on their way to a case. And there is just this God almighty scream, enough to put the hairs on the back of your neck up. And they're up ready to go find this poor woman that's being, you know, murdered or raped or whatever was going on. And then Bob suddenly sits back down and he goes, that's a wildcat. Now, this actually happened to me I just about shat myself. I can tell you, I was out in the middle of nowhere by myself, and this screaming starts, and I worked out it was a cat. But far out, it took me a little while, and I thought, I cannot not use that. That is amazing.
Yeah, that's locked in there. That,
Mm.
that feeling that, oh wow.
Yeah.
Unless you walk the street, unless you camp under the stars, how can you write about it? You can imagine only so much, can't you?
Yeah. Yeah, unless you're there, unless you've breathed it, smelt it, felt the flies, felt the dust on your skin. And that's why I want people to be able to feel that when they read these books. You know, I can tell you about, and I've written about this as well, what it's like to swim out into a dam and put a chain around a dead cow's neck. You know, that's why I say I will not romanticize anything about the country. I get a little bit annoyed at this farmer wants a wife thing. These TV shows, because they don't show rural life the way that it is.
No, it's very romanticized, yeah. And there, I guess there is a romance element to it, romance to everything, but it's not all Banjo Patterson. It's a bit more. I mean, Banjo told some pretty dark stories too, but yeah.
Yeah. If I was going to get all politically involved with this, I would say there is no way that these girls should be asking what their boy's favourite dinner is or what this. They should be asking about the dynamics of the family farm and, you know, how they're going to fit in and how it's all going to work. You know, yeah. I refuse to watch it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Now, Fleur, 2 books a year. That's a pretty big schedule, but I've got a really great question here from Mike Smallman. He says, I enjoyed, just saying what you were saying before, I enjoyed reading the story and was surprised to learn that you did not plan an ending. The complexities of the story point to a plan and careful construction. You know, is there perhaps in the back of your mind something? Or
No.
It's just experience?
No, sorry, Mike. No, that's just I don't know. Half the time I don't know what I'm going to write until I sit down and I write. You know, I spend a lot of time, I think, in my subconscious when I'm writing, because sometimes I go back and I look at the manuscripts and I go, oh, I don't remember writing that, and yet it has to be me because it hasn't been edited, and I just, no one else is going to write the book, are they? That'd be nice. But I just sometimes don't even realise what I'm going to write until I put my fingers on the keyboard. So the editors, I think what perhaps happens is I put in a really raw piece of work, and you know, we do some pretty major edits with these books. So perhaps the editors pull it together beautifully, maybe.
Sure. But you know, you pulled it off more than 20 times, so
And I have very good editors. Look, I do. I have very, and you know, we have funny conversations in Sapphire Falls. Right at the beginning of that, there's a little bit of a. They're not really sure. There is a death, but they're not sure sort of how the deaths occurred. And I was talking to one of my editors about this early on, and she said to me, "Oh, so where is the coffin now?" And this was, I don't know, we were probably 3/4 of the way through the book. Where is the coffin now? And I said, "Oh, that's an interesting point. Probably back in chapter 3 in the front of the church where we left it." We probably should go and do something with that.
Fair enough. Oh, that's great. That's great. And so, look, 2 books a year. That sounds like a lot, but how do you go about it? So you would be writing into the night, and then perhaps editing another one, like positioning it. So you've always got something on the go, and the mind.
Yeah, I do find it very difficult to edit when I'm writing, or the other way around. So I tend to like to finish a book before I start the next one. That doesn't always work in well, and sometimes makes for a late manuscript, a missed deadline. So it would be much easier if I could do both at the same time, but I really don't like doing that. I just like to concentrate on the book that I'm doing. So write like a mad thing for 6 or 8 weeks, get the book finished, wait for the edits to come back, sort of gather myself and regroup, and then start thinking about the next book. Absolutely, start making some notes. My friends reckon I procrastinate quite a lot, but I actually sit. I like to sit and I like to think. So I say that I percolate. That's where I just sort of sit in the background with a coffee and think about things, because then I have a little bit of an idea, and whether or not I've actually got. I will, like I said before, I'll never have the full story, but I might have it'll be working out the characters and what their likes and dislikes are, rather than actually putting a plot together. It'll be cementing settings, cementing the people inside of the book. And what I do is I make the plot work for the characters that I've got. So I know some people say that they've got to have the plot first or the characters first, and the plot works itself around. But I'll have the plot, and I'll make the characters work around that, or the crime. I'll have the crime, and the characters will work around that.
That's great, yeah, because you can it feels very natural, with Dave and Bob they're going where you would think they would go and doing logical things, but then other things come at them that push them off in these different directions. So it never feels like we're on rails. It always feels like quite organic. That's the effect you're going for, right? So you're fitting the plot to the characters.
I'm the most chaotic person that ever walked the face of the earth, and every aspect of my life is like that. So this is how we write books, and I wish that I could be. I wish I could use Scrivener and have all those little lovely note things up in the corner where you've got, so and so's got blue eyes, and this is what's got to happen in that chapter. And look, I've tried to do that, but it just does not work for me. I work really well under deadlines, and I work really well under pressure, and that's what I seem to excel at.
I was going to say, Fleur, you say you work in chaos, but I bet all your farm gates are shut and everything's.
Come onto my farm and don't shut a gate that's already shut. There will be trouble.
Absolutely. A mate of mine took me to his farm years ago and over in New South Wales, and that was the first thing that they all said. It's like when you get on a boat, everyone just says don't fall off. It was like shut the gate, shut the bloody gate.
Yeah. If the gate, just leave the gate as you found it. You don't have to shut it. If it's open, you can drive through it and not shut it. Just leave it as you found it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Fleur, what's coming up next? What have you, I'm just going to say we've got about 18 minutes left. So if anyone's got a question for Fleur, please get them in now. I'll weave them into the chat, or we can leave them for next. It can be about Into the Night, any other book that she's got on the board. But, what's next for you? What's happening?
Editing this next book for November. And I think we're going to put a pretty big tour together for November, so that'll be really good fun. It's been so nice to be able to get back on the road and get out and talk to readers and see readers. It's one of my favourite things to do. So I've just had a little tour over on the Peninsula for Into the Night, so it was great to get over there. And then I'll have to be writing the April book, because that's due on the 1st of September. So my deadlines are the 1st of, I'll get this right, 1st of March for the November book and the 1st of September for the April book. So they're what I've got to try and work to. I think I actually brought that September deadline forward a month, so I could try and actually make it. So there's those things that I've got on. My son Hayden is planning to fly around Australia, so solo in September. So we're sort of getting ready for that. And I work at I volunteer at the Esperance Show office for our 2-day show. So I work there half a day a week. And I deliver Meals on Wheels and a few other volunteer positions. So there's all of those things sort of going on that take time and keep me busy. But mostly, we're going to be seeding in the next couple of weeks, I would imagine. So then there'll be shearing, and then there'll be harvest, and then there'll be books, and we'll start again.
Well, you reap what you sow, don't you? So that's the way. Can you tell us a bit about Hayden's flight around Australia? We were talking about that before. You shared it on social media. He was on Channel 9 talking about it.
Yeah, he was. And he was a ABC Trailblazers winner this year as well. So, yeah, he's doing really well. So Hayden is probably the reason I started to write again, because I was, he's autistic and he was having a lot of trouble with his attention span. So I wrote 2 children's books. I actually wrote more, but I wrote 2 children's books. And that was the reason I got back into writing. So, I'm really proud that Hayden's going to go and do this flight. He's hoping to raise understanding about employing neurodiverse people into businesses. A lot of people get very scared when they hear the word autism, and these kids are pretty amazing. They just need a bit of different type of support inside of those organisations that they work for. So he's hoping to raise understanding about employing them, and then the support that these kids need inside businesses. But the other thing he's really keen to do is just see if there's some way of being able to change the medical process for neurodiverse people that are going to try and be pilots. Hayden would love to be a commercial pilot, but because he's got autism, at the moment he's restricted because he isn't able to get his class 2 or class 3. His class 3 is what you need to fly commercially. And look, aviation is a really strong thing in my family. My dad's a pilot. My 2 cousins are pilots, and so we know we cannot upset the aeronautical safety. We understand that, but we just want CASA to look at him without his diagnosis. We want them to look at his ability. So he sort of feels that if he gets the runs on the board with flying around Australia, so he's leaving on the 11th of September, a tiny little plane. It's Jabiru 120, and he is taller than I am. So he gets in and he sort of folds himself into this plane like a praying mantis. When he gets out, he sort of unfolds himself. So, yeah, he's leaving on the 11th of September. His mother will be spending most of the time at the hairdressers while he's away to get rid of all the grey hairs. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, we're looking for sponsors. And if anyone's really keen just to look at his story, he's wingswithoutbarriers.com.au. And he's got a YouTube channel where he talks about what it's like to be autistic and what it's like to be inside his body. So the people that are not neurodiverse, and I won't use the right terminology because I forget it, but people like us can understand how people like him feel.
Just pop the there we go, wingswithoutbarriers.com.au. That's in the chat, so anyone can have a look. And I was going to ask, what's the range on the plane? How far can he fly?
Oh, I think now, I hope he's not listening because I'm sure I'll get this wrong, but I think it's somewhere between 3 and 5 hours. Yeah, so he's got something like 36 stops all the way around, but I think there's 60 including the refueling. So yeah.
And where's he flying to first? Is he going clockwise or anti-clockwise?
He's going east from here. So WA going east to Ceduna, Whyalla, then he's going to mum and dad's place, sort of in the Flinders Ranges there, and he's going to go out and do some talks to people around there. And then he keeps going on through Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, and up and around. And, he'll be getting to, it's going to be quite warm by the time he's sort of getting towards Queensland. So what he'll have to do there, because this plane can't fly in 40-degree heat because the air pressure is too thick for it, it won't be able to fly or get up. So he'll have to be taken off pretty early and getting all of his flights done early so he avoids the weather.
Be a good adventure, but yes, you'll be in the hairdressers a bit, but yeah, that's all right.
Someone asked if I was going to go and follow him around, but that's not the object. The object is that he does this himself.
Sure. I've got a couple of questions as well. I'm just on this. Melanie, that says Leo's secret child was autistic. Did you base him on a character that you know? So were you inspired by Hayden with that aspect of Into the Night?
No, look, I know lots of autistic kids. It wasn't based on anybody. It actually took me a really, I had to take a bit of a deep breath when I decided to create that character, because it's still very raw, even though because I've got 2 kids with disabilities, and it's still quite raw for me, and I never thought that I would write about it. So that's why he's just like a little small character in the story. But they're just beautiful kids. So no, it certainly wasn't based on it. Maybe based on my my knowledge, perhaps, of autism rather than anyone in particular.
Good to include, yeah, like because you're like you say, it's real life. This is where you're seeing things.
Yeah.
Another question as well, also from Mike Smallman. Another one. So he says, you took us to York and Up and Northton as fictitious places. Why did you not continue the fiction with Perth and Meekatharra?
Well, because they were places that it wasn't really set, like there was that they didn't spend a lot of time in those places. I like to keep fictional towns, but use real towns around them, so you get a bit of an idea about where these places are set. Now, I'm pretty sure you've said York and Up, you've probably got a bit of an idea, if you know anything about WA, where that's going to be, and the same with Northton. It's more so just giving people that idea about where you are by putting those landmarks in.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was just in York. York. I was in York about 3 or 4 weeks ago for the Writers' Festival there. It was great.
Oh, yeah. It's a gorgeous little town. So I came through York in January 12 months ago, and it was a revolting day. Like the land, you could just feel it being scorched. And I was walking down the main street, and I went up to the lookout, and I was looking around the whole area, and I took a heap of photos, and I thought, I can set a book here somewhere. I know that I can. Just it was like, I don't know, it just almost burnt you as you breathed. Yeah.
Trapped in those valleys, it's incredible. And then in the wintertime, the cold does the same. It's incredible. Yeah.
Well, I know I'd rather be there in winter than summer. I don't do heat.
I was going to say, I saw a photo of you on your Instagram. You were sitting on your veranda with a like a potbelly stove.
Yeah.
That's a great setup. That's a good spot.
Yeah, well, I write anyway. I do like to write outside, and I'm happier outside, whether it's freezing cold or whether it's not. So, I'm just as happy to sit out there and get on the patio and get that outdoor fire going and sit there and write than what I am to sit inside with the normal fire going. But yeah, I think when you've got that heat and that real crisp cold, I think that keeps your brain a little bit alert and alive as well.
I agree. I write outside too. Even though I have like a writing desk with, with all the stuff that I'm supposed to be using, I just neglect it and go outside.
Me too.
It's better. You just rug up and you're part of it. You're connected. It's almost otherworldly. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Well, if anybody has a final question for Fleur, please do jump in. But Fleur, how would you describe Dave? What's at Dave's core? You've really got a feel for this character now. I think there's 6 books with Dave, including Into the Night with him. How familiar are you with him, or do you think he still has some surprises in store for you? Are there hidden depths that you haven't gone to yet?
Well, look, he's actually probably in basically 18 of the 21 books that I've written, because there's that young and that old Dave series. In the November books, where he's not a main character, it is the strong female lead characters, but Dave sort of just has to be in the background because he's totally unable to not try and fix something for somebody if they're having a hard time. And what he's gone through with his kids Into the Night really makes him through to who he is now when he's married to a different woman. He's married to Kim in the modern day. So, at the core of Dave is nothing but good. But in the young Dave, he is completely flawed. He's a hothead. He pushes boundaries that he shouldn't do. And he does do that in some of the later books, but not as much. I know that he is the bane of his superiors, because he tends to, like I say, is pushing these boundaries, and he doesn't care just so long as he gets the right person for the crime. You know, he wants these people to be, he wants to protect the families. You know, that's a really big thing. And that's part of the problem that he has with Mel when he's married to Mel in these Young Dave Burrows books, is that, you know, he says, there is nobody else for these people to rely on other than me. They've had this horrific thing happen to their family, and I am the one that they're going to rely on to solve it, fix it, whatever the outcome is. So yeah, he's got an amazing heart. That's his core, is his heart.
Well, you've certainly put his heart through the ringer. What's next for him? Can you any hints, any areas of interest for you?
Well, actually, to be really honest, I've got no idea, because I haven't started writing this next book yet. So I haven't got his client. But for the November book, what are we doing in the November book? So that's when he's living in Barker in the Flinders Ranges in the November book, and I'm just trying to remember. So he's got a new constable, a new female constable that's just started working under him 12 months previously, and so they're working. So it's probably more about Mia than what it is about Dave and Mia's story. But there's also a girl called Sassy in that who is coming back in. She's tried to make it home in time before her grandma dies, and she doesn't quite make it. And then there's a few little family things that have gone wrong, and few little family secrets that between Mia and Dave they'll have to do something with.
Fantastic. Fleur, I've seen you teach writing. You're a very generous teacher. I was at the Fellowship of Australian Writers of Western Australia, FAWA, in Swanbourne. You actually drove all the way from your home in Esperance to do this class, and then you drove all the way back. It's a lot of dedication there. For anyone listening who is a writer or aspires to be a writer, what would be, what's your big advice? What's the tip that that could maybe usher somebody in or encourage them to keep going?
Look, do you know, when people ask me this, I really don't know the answer, because I don't know how I do what I do. All I know is I sit down and I write. The writing course that I've got is because I want new people to have opportunities in writing. I want newbies to have opportunities in publishing. I try and support as much as what I can in all of that area, because there wasn't a lot around when I first started. So I want to make sure that anyone that wants to have a crack at writing and being published has got the chance to do that with some support behind them. I guess my biggest thought process would be, you can't edit a blank page, so you might as well get on and write something that's crap and then go back and have a look at it, and just try and juggle around writing for 5 or 10 minutes every day and swap your writing areas around. Like we've talked about before, I like writing outside, you like writing outside. I'm the same as you. I've got this perfect writer's desk here, I've got a stand-up desk. I create better outside. So go and find your writing niche. Some people love writing in cafes because it's noisy. I can't bear it because it is noisy. All that sort of.
Reading my terrible writing, probably.
Yeah. The only good thing about writing in cafes is the coffee.
Yeah.
But I think that would be my 2 pieces of advice. Just move around where you're writing and see if there's somewhere that fits better with you than other places.
That's beautiful, Fleur. Thank you. And I guess just a final question: when can people see you and connect with you? You love to meet readers, and when you've got a book out, especially, you're always traveling and touring. What have you got coming up in Western Australia and beyond for the rest of the year?
Oh, well, I haven't got too much actually. So, Hayden's taking up a little bit of time, but, I'm always around on social media and I'm pretty easy to find. And if someone, if you send me an email or whatever, I will always do my best to answer. It might take me 2 or 3 days, but, I will always answer. But look, as soon as that we might be doing something in November in WA. It's been a long time since we've done something over here, so we might sort of put that into the November New South Wales Queensland tour as well. But look, I'm in Esperance. People can find me pretty easily, and I never promise to catch up with everybody if they do let me know they're in town, but I do try. occasionally. So yeah.
Thank you, Fleur. Well, our hour together has whizzed by, as does the reading of Into the Night. Thank you very much for all your time tonight and sharing all your stories behind this. It was a real pleasure to speak to you, and I'm sure our audience enjoyed it too. And thank you to everybody from the Libby Book Club for WA for tuning in and for your great questions as well. That's what book clubs are about. Let's ask questions and have a chat and read great books. So
absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. And our Libby Book Club next month, I've just got to get the promo in. It's going to be, instead of a Wednesday, it's going to be on Tuesday, the 16th. So we're going to be doing it on the Tuesday. So there'll be some details up on the website pretty soon. It's our new book is going to be called How to Be Remembered by Michael Thompson. It's his debut novel. He's a journalist and podcaster. And you'll get a tickle out of this, Fleur. It's a book about a young kid who every day, on the exact same day, everybody that he loves and knows loses memory of him. So he has to reintroduce himself every year again and again and again. So this is a story of connection and memory and loss and how we relate to each other. And, what would you do if everybody all of a sudden forgot who you were as regular as clockwork?
Can I just say, I listened to this book on audio only 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you are all going to love it. It is just, I can't even tell you, it is so beautiful. Yeah, you don't miss that one, because it's an amazing book.
That's a top endorsement. Thank you, Fleur. I'll take that. I'll see everybody next time, Tuesday the 16th, and for our next book, How to Be Remembered by Michael Thompson. Fleur McDonald, thank you very much for your time, and we'll see everybody later. Bye-bye.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye-bye.